Hi, my name's Dean Ayala, and I'm a game designer on Hearthstone.
So Dean, talk about what you announced here at BlizzCon.
We announced Mean Streets of Gadgetzan, which is our latest expansion. It has 132 brand new cards. We're introducing the tri-class mechanic, which is super exciting to us. We get to introduce like these three families and talk about like Gadgetzan, and it's fun to create really sort of like a new, like what is Gadgetzan reimagined, I guess, and what characters are part of this area now. So yeah, it's our brand new expansion, Mean Streets of Gadgetzan. It's gonna be awesome.
So talk about how fan feedback has helped you improve card design in the new expansion.
Geez, I've been working on sets now since the first one, Extremis, and it's extremely helpful. I think that one of the biggest things we learn over time is how important it is to introduce new cards that are creating new archetypes as opposed to just new cards that people are putting in their deck. Because it's a lot different to have, Ramp Druid or Freeze Mage and be like, oh, here's Ramp Druid and new cards came out, let me put these 8 new cards in my Ramp Druid. And then people queue up on ladder and they're like, great, Ramp Druid, awesome. So I think something that we really focus on, especially in Mean Streets of Gadgetzan, is creating cards that create new archetypes. And I think that cards like Kazakis, they really do that. Like, people aren't playing as much, like the no duplicates mage and priest and warlock, and giving people more resources and still having Reno Jackson around. That's really going to push all these new archetypes, and you're going to queue up on ladder, and you're going to play games, and it's going to feel different than it has in the last few months. And that's one of the biggest objectives we have with any expansion is I log in, new stuff is happening, things feel fresh.
So what are you guys doing to make a zoo deck a more viable build?
A zoo deck, a more viable build? I think the zoo is, particularly talking about Warlock, is already fairly strong, I think.
Paladin zoo.
Oh, Paladin zoo. I think anytime you're introducing a bunch of like any creatures from like the 1 to 3 mana range, like zoo style decks, they tend to try to utilize as many of those cards as possible. So we're going to be, talking a lot about a lot of these 1 to 3 mana cards over the next couple weeks. So I think you guys will be able to see a lot of the exciting stuff that a lot of these aggressive decks are getting during that time.
Now, Gadgetzan is a very famous place in World of Warcraft, but it doesn't look as interesting as the card game is making it interesting. It's a little, Desolence is a little thing, and where is it again? I can't remember. It's Tenaris, right? It's in Tenaris. It's a little town. There's not a lot of stuff going on, but the expansion makes it seem like a very, exotic, awesome, dangerous place to explore.
So I think talking more like about Karazhan, we had. There's Magic Castle, and it's really cool, and it means a lot of different things over the course of the Warcraft timeline, and we were able to sort of reimagine what is Hearthstone's story with Karazhan, and that's really fun to get to explore that. And with Gadgetzan, we had sort of the idea like, oh, this big bustling town with all these like new interesting characters, and where in the Warcraft universe makes the most sense to do that. And post-Cataclysm, Gadgetzan is now a port town, and we start to imagine like, well, what happens when your city is now a port town, and there's business, and there's trade, and like what happens to your city, and then being able to really explore down that line and be like, oh, what if it turned into this much larger city, and now all these new characters came in, and what happens when a bunch of new characters come to a city? People are vying for power, and who are those groups? And so I think you just keep going down the rabbit hole and talking about like what are the cool things that we could do, and eventually we ended up on Mean Streets of Gadgetzan, which I think is totally awesome. So I'm really excited we were able to do it.
Now, as a game designer, what does a card game open up for you creatively over like an MMO or an action game?
Being able to talk about we have so much synergy in our game. Like all of our cards are really interacting with one another. And like I said before, like something that we learn over time is how important it is to have a lot of these cards that they look like just one piece, but they really work in a lot of different ways. Like in Priest, for example, we're trying to push like a bunch of different archetypes where we have decks like that are more creature based, like dragon decks, and we released a card called Dragonhead Operative that we really hope can make that Dragon Priest like more exciting for people to play. And I think another type of strategy that we're looking into is, I think Priest players right now want to play a little bit more reactively. I think that there's a certain kind of player that likes to hold a bunch of stuff back and react to what you do, and play all these like 2 and 3 card combos. And we made a card called Potion of Madness that I think is really helpful to that type of strategy. So having like all of these individual cards and finding a place for them, finding like who is the player that's really excited to play this card, like what level of complexity do we make like this card or X card or Y card. So like all the synergies, I guess, is really important to me. It's awesome.
What do you think it is about the card game genre in general that makes it so popular? I mean, since you announced Hearthstone, a lot of games have introduced card packs to their mechanic in some place. Call of Duty's done it, Gears of War's done it, and it's just there's something about opening packs, I guess, that people enjoy doing.
It's really like all the aspects of Hearthstone to me. I think when we're talking about any of our features, like Hearthstone has a very, this is like a fun and whimsical game, and like how can we make all aspects and all of our features really speak to like what the thematics of our game are. So speaking to other games, I don't really know, but in terms of Hearthstone, we just have like everything needs to be fun and everything needs to be accessible. And we have places like Tavern Brawl where we're able to experiment with like one or another group of players and really give them exactly what they want for that week. But in general, something I think that makes Hearthstone very successful is the fact that we're trying to make everything as accessible as possible and as fun as possible. And that is the first thing that we're looking above all else.
Do you think eventually in Hearthstone we'll see more reactive cards right now? Because the only thing you can do on your opponent's turn are traps and maybe some very specific card abilities on the table. But will we see like maybe interrupts in the future that you can actually play on your opponent's turn?
I mean, a lot of us have played, all the card games. Every time a new card game comes out, we're playing it and we're trying to understand, like, what everyone is doing and what are the interesting things going on. And of course, that's something that we've talked about. We've talked about things like, graveyard mechanics and doing things with discard piles. And a lot of that stuff is really interesting. But for now, I think there's enough space for us to explore without trying to get too crazy in terms of like adding, a new user interface to like the game board or anything like that. So I think right now we're exploring like what are some new keywords that we could introduce that are really, really cool. Stuff like tri-class cards. I think there's a lot of space to explore. So, of course, that's stuff that we talk about. It's something that, this definitely will never happen. Nothing like that, but not something in the near future.
And when does the Mean Streets of Gadgetzan come out?
The Mean Streets of Gadgetzan will be out in early December.